Welcome to episode 9 of Living in Recovery, a podcast devoted to sharing the stories of fellow CBP employees who are living in recovery with an addiction. The focus of this podcast is to share the experiences of those who have struggled with alcohol or drugs in the hopes of breaking the stigma that's often associated with addiction. Also, the goal of this podcast is to stimulate hope amongst those who may be struggling but are discouraged or intimidated by the prospect of seeking help. As a disclaimer, the words expressed in this podcast are based on personal experiences alone and are not meant to be taken as medical advice or to promote one method of treatment. Today, Alana shares her recovery experience and how treatment helped her come to terms with her addiction. Now Alana discusses what works with her in her approach to recovery. Alana, when did you first know you had a problem?
First, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's an honor to share my story of recovery. So I knew I had a problem probably quite a while before I actually sought help. And to even get to that, I got to start to tell my story a little bit from the beginning and what my history with alcoholism is. I grew up in a great household, had a lot of friends, went to school, played sports, and I didn't really start drinking until college. And they call it alcoholism is a progressive disease. And in college, everybody thinks it's normal. You drink, you have fun. I was at a sorority, all that kind of stuff. And then I went on to get my master's in criminal justice. And then I went and had a job in Manhattan, and my drinking kept getting worse and worse. And like I said, it was slowly progressing in the beginning. So it would be like where I would just drink on the weekends. Then it went to drinking only on Mondays and whatever days. And also, I was also in the closet. So I think being in the closet accelerated my drinking a little bit. I don't know that for a fact. That's just something I'm looking back on because I had to, for me at the time, because of fear and shame and guilt, I had to hide a certain part of my life because I wasn't being true to myself either. Then I started drinking a lot more. And as I started drinking more and more, it became almost an everyday thing. It got to a point where the only time I wasn't drinking was when I was at work. And I went from weekends, like I said, to almost every night. And then whether I was at work or somewhere where I couldn't drink, I would be thinking about it all day. And then I remember, I think it was about 2 years before I got sober. I thought to myself, I got a problem. And I think I was either like hiding the alcohol in my house or hiding it from someone because I didn't want the person I was with to know that the person I was in a relationship with at that time to know I had a problem. Maybe drink a little bit in front of them. But on the other hand, I'm hiding it somewhere else in the house. And because I knew about alcoholism, it runs in my family, I was like, I think I have a problem. And this is just to myself, and this is in hindsight. But I do remember that. But I was nowhere ready. It was like just at that point, it just built the guilt and shame. And I didn't tell anyone. Maybe when I was at the bar drinking, I was like, yeah, I have a problem. Like people talk to each other like that or whatever. Probably about 2 years after that, June of 2013, I moved. And I was working in DC and I just got a new position. And at the time I was living alone. It was just me and my dog. And alcoholism, the disease of alcoholism is isolation. And for me, I'm not a good person with isolation. Like I said, I grew up in sports, had a lot of friends. So being in the state of drinking almost all the time and also being in the closet, hiding a part of my life that maybe only 2 or 3 people knew was so difficult for me. And because I have integrity, it was so hard to lie to people. So I just kept isolated. And it was like I remember it as like my apartment. It was just dark all the time, blind shut, very depressing, I would say. And I got to a point where it was like I couldn't live with alcohol and I couldn't live without it. It wasn't the reason I started drinking. One of the reasons is because it hid all those emotions, all that fear and guilt and shame, anxiety. It just, in the beginning, it worked, right? But it's so progressive. It doesn't work anymore. And so then it flipped where I had more anxiety and more guilt and more shame. And I got to a point where it was just like, I know I need to go to AA. Like I knew that was the solution for me, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to take that step of asking for help or at least stop drinking. So I wanted to find other ways. And I already tried all the other ways of, all right, I'm only going to drink a certain amount or write down how much I drink. I don't go over this amount because that's what we do. And I hear it all the time in the room. So we try every single way to figure out how to drink before we stop drinking. And when I was at that point, it was like some people, when they talk about bottoms, right? A DUI, going to jail, a relationship, losing a job. We hear that. And that's some people's bottoms, which means that's where a consequence happened and they stopped drinking. For me, it was an emotional bottom. I got so depressed and that I knew that wasn't me. So I knew I had to go get help because I was having these thoughts of being so angry with myself and so embarrassed that I couldn't stop drinking. Like physically, emotionally, spiritually, I was totally done. I was addicted in every way you could think of. So I reached out to someone and they said, why don't you go to therapy? And so I said, okay. And so I went to a therapist and I told her the truth. Listen, I think I have a problem, but I don't really want to get help. And so that was probably August. And she kept saying, there's AA, there's treatment options. And I'm like, for me, the drink, it was like my salvation. Like that's what I thought helped me with every aspect of my life, but it was only hurting me. And then we finally put a date on it. It was things would keep coming up. I'm like, I can't quit because of this. And I can't quit because of this. And I can't quit because of this. And then it was I turned 30 and I was like, I can't quit before that. It was my 30th birthday. So I made a date of the next day and I made dates before. So I didn't know that it was going to happen. It was just bad. August and September. The end was really bad emotionally for me. It felt very lonely. But I had a plan with a therapist and I followed through. And on October 23rd, 2013, I remember I went to work. I was shaky. I was nervous. And I came home. I got in my car and I went to an AA meeting. And I sat in that parking lot. And I was scared to death. And I've been to ones before. Something was different this time. And I walked into that room and I felt hope. And I don't know what the difference is from when I went to that meeting, from when I went years ago to try it out. I think because I was ready, because I felt so hopeless before in that dark room. I felt like I was in prison. Like I couldn't stop drinking. No matter what I did, I couldn't. And the answer was I needed help. And I was scared to reach out for help. But by going to therapy, that helped. And then I went to the AA meeting and I walked in and just like how life works, it's like the person who sat next to me lived around the corner from me. The person who spoke that night, she was never at that meeting before. She goes to another meeting on that night, but she was leading that meeting that night and she involved with dogs and stuff. And we just clicked. It was like, I have chills. So that gave me hope. And I didn't go to treatment. So like I didn't go through detox. I did it all on my own, which I do not suggest at all. That wasn't a very smart decision, but the hope made me keep going. And then I just kept going to meetings. I did 90 and 90. And then I think I went to a meeting every day for the first year, if not two. So that's a long-winded answer to when I knew I had a problem. I think throughout my drinking, I knew I had a problem. I had that knot in my feeling when I would wake up and not remember everything. Oh, like, this is not good. But I would keep going because the drink at that time, I thought it was helping my anxiety. But it gets to a certain point where it makes it worse. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You said a little while ago that you knew that AA was the route you wanted to go. How did you decide AA or over any other form of treatment?
For me, and I think everything, and I'll say this, I don't promote anything. It's attraction over promotion. People get sober in all different ways, and whatever works for one person might not work for another. But for me, it worked. My dad's a recovering alcoholic. He just got 41 years in February. So He's been sober as long as I've been alive because I turned 41 this October. And I saw him, this life. I grew up with AA in my life and Al-Anon. because my mom goes to Al-Anon. And I saw all his friends and all the people around him. And I went to Al-Anon as a kid. My parents got me into Al-Anon because it's in the family. So I knew about it. And this is years, right? So I don't think I was thinking it at that moment when I went into AA, but I knew that's where I had to go. And my parents led by example. They never were like, you need to do this, you need to do that. I just knew where to go because they did this, or my dad did this. And so that's how I knew about AA. And that's how it just worked. I mean, I was scared to go to, maybe because of the job, maybe because of my ego, maybe because I didn't know how to ask for help. I was scared to go to treatment or rehab or anything like that. And I wish I knew better, because that probably would have helped me a little bit more, because my hands probably shook for a year. Yeah, but that worked for me, and it still does to this day.
We've had others on here that have mentioned the 90 meetings in 90 days.
It's huge. It was something for me to look forward to. So I would feel all this anxiety, and I would be like, all right, I'm going to a meeting today. I'm going to see my new friend, or this person who I really look up to, and I'm going to meet new people. And that's what the people who I met that first day introduced me to everyone and got me in, just introduced me, made me feel comfortable, accepted me for who I was. It felt like home, and it still does. It's amazing. And that's why 90 and 90 is so important for me, because it makes you go to the same meeting every night. So Monday I'm going to this meeting, Tuesday I'm going to this meeting. I'm going to see the same person sitting in the same chair that sits there every week. And you get to know people, and you get to hear their story. And all our stories are different, right? Very different. Like I said, I had an emotional bottom. And I was lucky. I never drank and drove, because honestly, I think the job saved me because of that. I was so scared to lose my job. I was always taking cabs everywhere. We would call it Uber now, but it's over 10 years ago, it was cabs. And I lived in New York at one time, and I would just take cabs. I was spend hundreds, stupid doing that because I didn't want to drink and drive. So thank God. But I could have lost my job. I was calling out sick. I was almost losing my relationship. There was a lot of consequences that could have happened. And we call them the not yets, right? If I talk about, we're in a meeting or something, or I'm talking to another alcoholic, and we'll talk about the not yets. Because some people will come into the rooms, or they'll come into treatment, whatever, and be like, I don't have a DUI. I didn't lose my job. I have a big house and all this stuff. Yeah, but that's not yets. Because if I would have kept going the way I was going, I don't even know how I would have been able to survive, but those all would have happened, because it's progressive. So those were the not yets. And maybe that was part of what scared me. But for me, I think it was totally like I was losing myself. And I realized that and knew I needed to do something.
That's interesting. I wonder if the same way you knew about AA is maybe you're able to recognize some of those same features in yourself.
A couple of years before I got sober, I went to a meeting because people were noticing I was having problems. I'm like, I'll go to a meeting just to appease them. But I wasn't really listening to the message. I wasn't living in the solution because I didn't want it. I didn't want it at that time. But something clicked, and the real time, because I wouldn't even say it was like the first time I was sober. It wasn't. But something was different this time. And I think because I knew about AA, that definitely helped. I knew where to go, and therapy helped also, because she knew my story, and she kept saying, "You sounds like you need to go."
Not everybody mentions having a bottom. How did you know it was your bottom, so to speak?
I think because I don't think I knew at the time it was my bottom, right? So what I was feeling at the time was such despair that I'd never felt in my life. Did I have thoughts of suicide? Not really, but I had thoughts of hurting myself. And that's the first time anything popped into my head. And I think that was it, because I never had those thoughts before. And I was so angry with myself that I was like wanted to hurt myself. And I said, I got to do something about it. It still took me 2 months from that moment, I think. But that's when I went and picked up the phone to call a friend of a friend. I don't even know how all that happened. And they said, you should go to therapy. And I went to therapy, and then I was able to work that out, because I didn't want to hurt myself. It was because I was alone, but I chose that. The disease brought me to that. It brought me to my knees. Like it kicked me in the stomach 1,000 times. And it was like, I kept getting up. I kept getting up. I kept getting up. And I just had to like surrender and say, this is a thought I never had in my life. And it scared me. So maybe that was it. Maybe I think being scared of my thoughts scared me. And I knew I had to do something about it. At the time, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I needed to reach out for some kind of help. And one thing led to another, and it led me to go into a 12-step program. And like I said, it's different for everyone. Some people, if I would have lost my job, I don't know if I would have quit drinking, because I think that would have just put me in more guilt and shame of, now I lost my job, so whatever. I was losing myself, and it was a lonely place to be. I never want to go back there. I remember, I could remember how I felt, the knots in my stomach of just feeling hopeless. I felt hopeless, but I don't know if it's because I knew people in recovery, but I knew there was a solution. I think I was just scared to find it, because I was scared to live life without my medicine, which was alcohol at the time. That numbed me from feeling any bad things, but it also numbed me from feeling the good things. I wasn't me anymore. And I think I realized that, and I didn't want to lose myself. So I think that was probably it for me.
Yeah. But it's interesting. You've said a couple times now how the loneliness and the isolation, you will remember that. But having gone to AA and how excited you were to see your friends, and it's funny how that is such the opposite.
Oh my gosh. I had to write a list when I got sober of all the things that I thought I would get in sobriety or I would get in my life. I would sell myself short. I don't ever have to be lonely again. On a daily basis, they're my family. And it takes time to make friendships and relationships, but we're all in the same boat. We know what we're feeling. I could say something and my friends know how I feel. And the only time I'm lonely is when I make the choice to be, because all I got to do is pick up the phone. It's so crazy, because I never thought that you could find people who are not blood related to always be there for you. I've moved 5 times since 2019. And I got sober in Maryland, and I made a lot of friends there by going to the program, and it was hard to leave them. But I pick up the phone today and I talk to them. I have a friend coming out who got sober 3 or 4 weeks after me, and we've been sober ever since. She's coming to visit in a couple of weeks, and it's amazing because it brings light. You know, I always think of it like I was in the darkness and now I'm in the light. And of course I have dark days and troubles and struggles. I always have someone to bounce an idea off of. And even when I'm not being like open, or even when I want to be isolated, someone usually knows what's going on and picks up the phone and calls me, or invites me to either a meeting or just to go out for a cup of coffee, because they know something's going on because I'm acting different. And it makes me accountable. So it's so hard to explain. It's so hard to put in words of the love that is there and that I feel on a daily basis.
Did you ever think that going to AA would have a negative impact on your federal career?
Oh, yeah. Back then, I thought anything I did. Yes, I did. I don't believe that the agency had the resources then that they do have now. I'm not sure what resources they had back in 2010, 11, when I got sober, 2013. But yeah, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't be like, yeah, I'm on a 12-step program. Yes, I'm sober. Yes, I don't drink. I remember I think I went out with people from work because I didn't want to say no. I was so used to going out or whatever. And I would go out and they would think, oh, why aren't you drinking? And I would just be like, oh, I'm training for a race. So I was being dishonest. And maybe at the time I needed to be, because I was scared. I didn't know. I don't think we had the resources back then to make me feel safe to say, hey, I have a problem. I'm dealing with it. Maybe you guys could help me too. Those resources weren't there. And now that they are, that's wonderful for the agency. And if we can keep just adding on that and making people feel safe and comfortable that they're not going to lose their job. Because that's what I thought. I thought I would lose my job, even if I'm in AA, because they're like, she has a problem. But now I know better. It's something, my recovery is something I'm proud of. My life is, I live by integrity. To answer your question, I was worried about work, but now I'm not, because this is who I am. And if I can't be true to myself, then whatever's supposed to be will be. But thank God we have these resources. And that's why I wanted to share my story, so that if someone is me 10 years ago, maybe they're not going to say something to their boss or a coworker, but maybe a peer support member or a chaplain, or hear someone on this podcast and maybe reach out to them, or go to the website and EAP. EAP is a great resource. I haven't used it as much as I should, and I've started to use it more. I feel grateful that this job allows me to get help that is needed. If I need to go to therapy, I could call and we get 12 sessions. If I need financial help, I could call EAP. They'll set me up with someone. I think we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. But for me to be sitting here talking to you, we definitely have come a long way.
For sure. And that's the hope of doing these, is that somebody who's not quite sure gets a hold of an episode and it makes them realize that there's a whole community of people that they could connect with if they didn't want to be alone either.
Yeah, absolutely. And the hardest thing is, I would say for me, was the first time I had to ask for help, the first time I went to that meeting or whatever. It's that first initial. They say the phone weighs 10,000 pounds, right? And sometimes it still does for me to pick up the phone and ask for help. It's a hard thing to do, but once I did it, I always feel better. And what we have in our minds, or what I have in my mind, is the problem is so much worse in our head, not alcoholism, but whatever we're going through. And at the time, I was worried about the job, and I was worried about this, and I was worried about that. But at the end of the day, I need to take care of myself, and I need to get sober, and I need to get better so that I can go to my job. Because I guarantee if I kept drinking, I have no idea where I would be. And it is scary to ask for help, but it's worth it. I remember being scared, but I'm so glad whatever made me do it. For anyone who's listening, that is the hardest part, but it's the part that's going to save your life. And there's nothing to be embarrassed of at all. We're not meant to be alone in any of this, in any of our problems.
What do you think the biggest challenge to your recovery has been?
So it's a hard question to answer, because the challenges that I had when I was drinking outweigh anything I've been through in sobriety. And let's put that in context. 5 years into sobriety, and maybe this was my biggest challenge, I found out I had a brain tumor. It was benign, thank God. And I had to go through brain surgery, and they couldn't get the tumor all the way out. It's mostly out. And I do checkups every year, and I'm sure I'll be fine, right? But anxiety, right? The anxiety of that. But the program that I'm in has given me the tools to deal with that. So how I take drinking as one day at a time, I take that as one day at a time, or one moment at a time even. And that goes for anything in life's problems. And then we come across, I use the tools in the program and in life that I've learned through therapy to deal with this, to deal with challenges. But I would say the worst day that I had in my life was my bottom, because I felt so hopeless. So it's so hard to answer that question, because I don't think I might have challenges now, but I don't have challenges that I did. My life is so unmanageable. Today, as long as I don't take a drink, I can deal with anything. And it's not me. I could deal with it with other people, with their input. And maybe a challenge, I would think, maybe seeing people who have a problem that aren't ready yet, but I want to shake them, be like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is. I see it. I've been there. I've seen other people do it. And maybe that's the biggest challenge, seeing people suffer, and there's a solution. And the solution, like I said, it might not be a 12-step program. It might be rehab. It might be whatever works for you. So maybe that's the biggest challenge.
What do you think the best thing about being in recovery is?
To thine own self be true. When I was drinking and in the closet. And it took me a while after I got sober to come out of the closet, to be free. I am free to go anywhere I want to go or need to be. As long as I don't drink, I'm good. And I could do anything I want. When I was drinking, there was a limit on what I could do. I didn't even know who I was. So the best thing for me is selfishly to be true to myself, right? And to do the next right thing. And then unselfishly is to give it away, give what I have, meaning I'm coming up on 11 years of sobriety and it's one day at a time, but to help someone else, I can't even put that into words of how that makes me feel and how that helps me. It helps me to help someone else. So it's like this cycle of just helping other people. It helps you. It helps them, hopefully. Yeah, it would be it's hard. It'd be a tie between being true to myself and helping other people. But you got to be true to yourself and before you can help another person.
What would you say to someone who may be trying to decide if they should seek help?
Someone told me in my first days of sobriety, they said, you never have to feel like this again. And that hit me for some reason more than anything else, that I never have to feel that despair again. And they were right. And that gave me hope. And so I would probably say that to them. I would say that to them because that's what helped me. I would listen, of course, because listening is our biggest tool that we could use when we're helping people. And I could share my experience, strength, and hope and give them the resources that they could go to get that help and go with them for whatever help they need or whatever direction they want to go with that, with what help they want. Because like I said, there's many different ways, but the main thing I would want to give them is hope, because I feel like that's what we lose in alcoholism. And I can only talk for alcoholism. We lose the hope and they never have to be alone again. You never have to be alone again. You never have to feel this way again. It's going to be a little hard right now, but it's going to be worth it in the end. There is a stigma against alcoholism or drug use or whatever, and it's getting much better all around in our country and our agency. But I'm proud of being in recovery, of the people I know in recovery. I get choked up because they saved my life. We just celebrated our friend's first year anniversary yesterday. A bunch of us went out to dinner, and we have this all the time. My life is better than I ever dreamed of. Like I said, it's not all sunshine and butterflies. There are problems. It's not like you just stop drinking and life stops happening. Life happens. But I'm able to deal with it now. And I believe that people who get sober, who ask for help and get the tools, there's always hope. You don't have to be alone. Just pick up the phone and just ask for help. That's all you got to do. It's much easier than we make it out to be in our head, because most people want to help. They want to see people succeed. And the way our agency is going, I believe there's, between peer support and chaplains, they're out there and they want to help. That's why they became peer support members. So reach out to those people, talk to coworkers, because it's only going to get better. Once you put down the drink, it only gets better.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Living in Recovery. If you or someone you know needs help, reach out to the Employee Assistance Program to reach a licensed clinician at 1-800-755-7002. For additional resources related to the Alcohol and Substance Misuse Prevention Program, please visit the CBP Workforce Care Directorate page on CBPNet. You can also send questions directly to CBP Resiliency at cbp.dhs.gov.